Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? No? Okay. I can still see there are a few seats left, so if anyone is not seated yet, please come on in and join us. For those who don't know me, I'm Rob's Uncle Mark. Yesterday, we all gathered for the religious and spiritual celebration of Robbie's life. But Doug and Liz felt that it was very important that we also have a separate celebration, and that is why we were gathered all here today. And as you can see from the program, there will be 4 speakers, and I was honored to be the first on the list. Some of my thoughts, as we've all gone through this, I said, what do you think? What do you say? How do you feel when your 19-year-old nephew and godson is struck with an illness like this? Like all of you have been asking these questions, and I kept saying, why? Why Rob? I think Father Reminsky touched on it beautifully yesterday during his homily. Today, we're all going to try to do the same thing, but hopefully in a more celebratory manner. Rob and I had a chance actually to talk about that very subject a short time ago, and I expressed what I just said to all of you to him, and I told him that I was really struggling to find an answer. So he displayed the wisdom that he's been displaying beyond his years. He looked at me with his steely blue eyes, said, Uncle Mark, I'm really not sure. I do know that I was angry for quite a while, but as much as I didn't like it, I've accepted it. And I do know that sometime soon, the real reason will be revealed to me. So what is my take? I believe confidently that God has a plan. I may not understand it, I may not like it in human terms, and I may not be able to accept it, but Rob showed that me, he had a greater understanding than I when he spoke those words. So what do you think and what do you say about a young man? Well, you try to recall some of those memories. There were a number of things that struck me, but one of the first ones was my daughter Jennifer and her husband Damon got married in Simsbury, and then Kevin and Court got married in Vermont. And as we were all out on the dance floor, I won't embarrass you, Thomas, but Rob was running onto the dance floor and sliding through the legs of all the people that were dancing. He was full of energy. When this all started, I was taller than he was, and obviously that's not the case anymore. He participated in a lot of sports, but soccer obviously became his favorite. When it came to games, whether they're video games, card games, board games, you name it, he was extremely competitive. And I'm wondering, Liz, where he may have gotten that competitive nature. We Regans learned that if there was a poker game with Rob in it, likely by the end of the night, he'd be holding all the chips. He was a pretty good snowboarder as well. We Regans kind of refer to snowboarding as the dark side. Thomas and Will, although Thomas is a returner to the skiers world, spent a lot of time on the slopes, and particularly at Mount Snow. And as I was thinking back, the first inkling that I had that he was struck with this disease actually occurred at Mount Snow between Christmas and New Year's in 2011. He and I were together on the mountain, and he was having a hard time keeping up with the old guy, and he said he was short of breath, and his left knee really was bothering him. So we got back to the house, and I mentioned it to Liz, and I said, you know, an orthopedic injury really shouldn't be lasting that long. We really need to look into it. But at the time, we had no idea. He's touched many lives. First and obvious, the fact that all of you were here is a tremendous testimony. The fact that there were over 800 people Friday night, probably 400 people yesterday. There have been over 66,000 posts on Caring Bridge. Professional athletes and performers have reached out to him, and there's things on the table, whether they're balls or autographs or whatever. It's obvious that he touched many people. He was asked to speak about his battle with the SRCT for the Reed Sacco Foundation, and he did that in Gloucester, Mass. friends and neighbors of the Briscoes have provided food, friendship, prayers, and love from the start without ever being asked. Doctors, nurses, and the staff at CCMC were all touched by his battle with this awful disease. Many came on Friday night, many are here today. Even the folks at the front desk knew Rob. They would see him go by, and there was one woman, I believe her name was Deb, who was constantly talking to me about Rob. And she said she'd worked there for 10 years and she'd never seen anything like it. What have I learned from Rob? I found that it was absolutely possible to watch Home and Garden television 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Even when you saw the same show 15 times. I do have a new appreciation for that network. He taught me how to silence the alarms on many of his IVs when they were empty. He always knew which one was empty, and when the nurse came in to help him, he would point to her and tell her which medication it was that needed some help. That visits to the CCMC cafeteria were always an event. Rob was like a tour director in his wheelchair, and almost always had to have a nurse there because of the apparatus that had to travel with him. But then when we got into the cafeteria, he knew where every single thing was and say, Uncle Mark, cookies are over there. I'm gonna go get my wrap. And by the time we got done, we'd get to the register, and it was like there were 2 cents left over from his allocation every single time. It was amazing how he knew exactly how much everything cost. Oops, wrong page, here we go. The other thing was Rob liked breakfast. Sometimes it was in the morning, sometimes it was at night, but he really liked breakfast. And one that he became really fond of was from the First and Last Tavern Cafe and Bakery. Actually, Mike was the first one who brought him a breakfast from there, but there was a breakfast called the Scrambler. Now, obviously, that's scrambled eggs. Well, that's not Rob's breakfast. It was eggs over medium, not easy, over medium, bacon, toast, home fries, and most importantly, the mocha fudge muffin. And then the one that always got to me was, he'd say to me, Uncle Mark, you can shake my hand, and you can give me a hug when you come in and when you leave, but don't touch me. That was one of the hardest lessons. One of the hardest lessons I learned. My wife, a whole lot smarter than I am, worked to deal with him where they would blow kisses to each other. And, I didn't do that, but she did that. In conclusion, I was very fortunate to be able to spend the time that I did with Rob as a result of his hospitalization. I would guess that had he not been ill, both of us would have been so busy that with our personal lives, we wouldn't have had the quality time that we really had while he was there. However, I would trade that time for being with him now. I know that Paula and Mary said the same thing on Wednesday night when we gathered as a family, so I'm sure that many of you have felt the same thing. And lastly, to each of you, don't waste, and this is what Rob would say, don't waste the precious moments that you have been given. Take the time to look each other in the eyes and let your family and friends know that you care for them. That's the best lesson I've ever learned. So thank you for listening. Roy, you're up next.
Hi. All right. I don't know. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. First, I'd like to address a question that I'm sure many of you have, which is why is he wearing that ridiculous shirt? The answer is this: it's very comfortable. It's lightweight. It allows great airflow. Plus, I bought this shirt on the island of St. Thomas this past March when I was invited to go on a cruise with Rob, Will, and Mrs. Brisco. I thought the shirt was the best thing since sliced bread or NFL Red Zone, but Rob hated it, which motivated me to wear it for the rest of the cruise. So I figured it'd only be fitting to wear it today as well. Moving on, I would like to say thank you all for coming today, Rob was an amazing person who had a positive impact on everyone here. The reason I'm here is not to repeat what has been said before and much more eloquently than I could ever say it, but rather to offer some insight into Robbie as a friend and a companion. I've been told that I'm very lucky, or that Rob was very lucky to have me as a friend, but truthfully, I think I was the lucky one. I believe that our lives are composed of a few people that leave lasting impressions, and that these people are the ones we hold closest to our hearts. I can tell you now that Rob will always be my best friend, and he has forever changed me for the better. He was always my co-conspirator, my confidant. He was my brother from another mother. Whenever we were together, it was bound to be a good time, whether we were up in Vermont at Mark and Mary Jo's lovely home, playing Kings with Mrs. Brisco, which is an excellent story for another time, I promise, or whether we were just binge watching the Harry Potter movies in my basement. When I was with him, I was comfortable. We were perfect complements, and I think that might be why there's a beverage called the Rob Roy. But I must admit, it's a terrible cocktail. However, like that terrible cocktail, I think the thing that made our friendship work was that we accepted the worst of one another. Ask my parents, siblings, or my girlfriend, they'll tell you I'm terrible at communicating my feelings, which is true. But Rob always knew just what I was thinking, so he never had to ask. In return, I gave him the patience that we all know he needed, and I loved his never-ending wit. Even when he was in the hospital, he would respond with a series of undistinguishable groans, and I would find myself laughing because to me it made perfect sense. One of the best examples I can offer to show the quality of friend that Rob was happened when we were aboard the Norwegian Getaway, the same day that I got this amazing shirt. Mrs. Brisco, Will, and I were on a tour of St. Thomas when we spotted Megan's Bay from the highest peak on the island. As soon as we saw it, we knew we had to go there. So Will and I raced back to the ship to convince Rob with our powers of persuasion that this was something he needed to see. Being the silver-tongued devils we were, we made quick work of that task. We soon headed to the beach where Mrs. Brisco was already waiting for us. When we arrived, Rob headed over to the bar for some food. In the meantime, Will and I swam in the beautiful water. After drying off, we too made our way to the bar, which is when I had the great idea to drink as much as possible before we headed back to the ship, because I was not allowed to consume alcohol on board. A half hour, 2 Bahama Mamas, 2 Long Island iced teas, 2 Tom Collins, and a red stripe later, I climbed into the front of a cab with Rob. As we drove back to port, it became increasingly obvious to Rob and me that I was intoxicated. Very intoxicated. I have a series of selfies with Rob and the cab driver to prove it. Finally, we made it back on board, and another great Rob Roy idea hit us. It was time to gorge ourselves on the free room service. I can now tell you that BLTs, Caesar salads, liquor, and the motion of the ocean do not go well together. After I finished my long exchange with the toilet bowl, I decided to sit fully clothed, still looking fabulous in this shirt, in the spacious shower. As the water sobered me up, Rob, being the amazing friend he was, decided to keep me company. So there we were, 2 fully clothed men sitting in the shower, just talking. We sat there for what seemed like forever. If that's not true friendship, I don't know what is. However, that was the nature of our friendship. We were always there for one another. Nothing was ever owed because we chose to sacrifice for each other, to be there even if it wasn't always convenient or fun. We could always depend on one another. Even when I was gone, he was there for me. He looked out for the people I loved because he loved me. When I was in basic training, after 2 weeks, I was given 10 minutes to call home. Neither my parents nor my girlfriend answered, but Rob did. He was always there. Robbie was the best friend a person could ever ask for, and he was taken away from this world far too early, but I imagine that's because heaven needs extraordinary people like Robbie, and I know one day I will see him again. In the meantime, I will forever carry him in my heart and my mind. I'll never forget the only kid I have ever known to smile while enduring unimaginable pain. That was Rob. He always had a smile on, and he always pushed me to be better and stronger than I was before. I will always be thankful for the lifetime of laughing, crying, and memories he gave me in a few short years. I will always miss him. To Mrs. and Mr. Brisco, I want to say thank you for having an amazing son. To Will and Tom, you will always have my love and friendship. To all the family and friends that I know Rob loved and cared for, I want to say I'm sorry, but I know he will always be loved and remembered by each one of you. And to Rob, I want to say I love you, buddy. I always will, and I'll see you later.
Hello. I'm Christine. I'm a nurse practitioner and one of the many lucky people that got to care for Robbie at Connecticut Children's Medical Center over the past few years. First of all, I want to thank the Brisco family for inviting me to say a few words about Robbie today. I'm extremely honored. Your family has been incredible throughout this journey. Your strength and resiliency is truly amazing to me. Since the day I met you all, you've been so kind to me as part of Robbie's care team, and I've enjoyed every minute, however difficult, of taking care of your family. In one of the songs Doug recently wrote about Robbie, he notes that cancer was never part of the plan. Robbie was a busy guy. He had much better things to do than sit in the hospital. He had soccer and friends in school. When I first met Robbie, he would come into our clinic for chemotherapy 5 days per week, every 3 weeks. Robbie would send me messages when he arrived in Hartford so that I could alert the pharmacist to make his chemo because he had more important places to be. We would know that he had arrived in clinic because he would walk straight to the back and ask if his chemo was ready and if either Mary, Liz, or Jess, his clinic nurses, would access his port ASAP. He was on a tight schedule and he needed us to be prompt. The hardest part about his treatments was not being able to eat. Like most teenage boys, Robbie loved to eat. It was torture waiting the hour between his chemos to be able to. He would come in with a box of chocolate-glazed donuts or a whole box of cereal and stare at it until it was time. He would watch the clock and count the seconds, and when it was time, he would chow down. Food was the way to Robbie's heart. Waffle fries, ice cream, chicken wraps, Chipotle. There was no shame. The nurses and I will admit we bought Robbie's love with food. Robbie liked to pretend that he didn't love us. He would roll his eyes when we were silly and called him Disco Brisco, and he would fake being mad when we spelled his name with I-E, the girly way, instead of with a Y. He would fight us when we would force him to take silly selfies with us, but deep down we knew he loved it. Robbie had plans that did not involve cancer, chemotherapy, nurses, and doctors, but that's what he was dealt. And through it all, even the worst times, he brightened our days. During the last month or two in the hospital, despite the heavy medications and the pain, Robbie surprised me with how he was still Robbie. When the hospital discontinued their waffle fries, Robbie put up a fight and sent his people to track down the head of the kitchen. Wouldn't you know it, Robbie got his waffle fries. When his ice cream fell on the ground, he looked at the nurse and joked, 5-second rule. He visited with friends and kept up with others through the internet, and he never lost his sense of humor. I rarely worked the night shift, so a few weeks ago, when I worked overnight, Robbie made me check in every few hours to prove it to him that I was still there. He would open one squinty eye, look at me, and tell me that he was keeping an eye on me, to which I would reply, no, I'm keeping an eye on you. Another time, when we were visiting after our shift, his pump started beeping, and he said through a sleepy haze to Liz, his nurse, hey Liz, did you forget how to work a pump? In the years Robbie spent with us, our team got to see him experience important life events, school trips to Barcelona, going to his high school prom, earning his driver's license, and reveling in the independence it afforded him, becoming a hero at the hole-in-the-wall gang camp, graduating high school and leaving for college at Central, working hard to become a certified lifeguard, falling in love for the first time. The Briscos helped Robbie live a normal life in an extraordinarily challenging situation. I guess what I mean to say is that Robbie and his family never planned for any of this. Cancer took away soccer, college, family trips, and so much more. But it did not take away Robbie's playful spirit. He loved giving us a hard time, and we loved when he did. And underneath his playful banter was truly such a loving spirit. Robbie would never bother me when he knew I was on a day off or on vacation, and would never forget to wish me a good weekend. He wrote meaningful messages to his nurses last holiday season, thanking us for the care that we gave him. When he was in terrible pain, he would thank the team for helping, even when what we could offer never seemed like enough. He urged his family to go on vacation without him because he couldn't imagine making them stay. In his last week, he even asked to see his good friend who recently had surgery so that he could make sure he was okay. For all the pain that Robbie suffered, he continued to think of others. But Robbie always had better places to be than in the hospital. In his last day, Robbie told his nurse, Sarah, "We need to hurry up, I have to catch my flight." To which she replied, "Where are you going?" "I'm going home." In the end, Robbie was still on a tight schedule with better places ahead. When we remember Robbie, we will remember trips to the cafeteria. We will remember the excitement when he got to go to gaming conventions with Roy and Will. We will remember him telling us about the new dog he got while on vacation with his friends. We will remember him pieing Jess in the face to raise childhood cancer awareness. We will remember Chipotle dinners on the 8th floor. And we will remember him striding into clinic with a full box of cereal, with bright blue eyes and a smile, already asking if it was time to go yet. We were so lucky to have cared for and loved Robbie. To the Briscos, our clinic is still here for you. You have joined our family and we yours. Thank you for sharing your hearts and your 6'3" baby boy with us. You know the number to call.
So I'm Mike Isakoff. I was Robbie's oncologist. You said you were going to have a hard time, that's me. Taking care of Robbie was a real honor. I get to share an experience with a person one-on-one that's irreplaceable. When I first met Robbie, it was clear that he was independent and strong-willed, and he was not going to let this diagnosis control his life. He wanted to keep it that way, and the period of time that I really remember Robbie the most is when we treated him for a long period of time as an outpatient. One of his goals was not to receive chemotherapy as an inpatient after he experienced the initial intense chemotherapy that didn't really do anything for him. We designed treatments that could allow him to go to clinic and go home each day, even if this was every day for a week, and that's what he did, and I think Christine spoke to that well. He went to college, and every 3 weeks he drove in daily for 5 days. And he hated those delays, and I can't describe that any better than Christine did. He would crack jokes with me. He was a lot more goofy than I think he wanted to let on at times. He talked about his friends. He talked about playing golf. We talked a lot about sports. How I would like to remember Robbie is during that period of time where we were treating him. And he was strong, full of hope. He was sarcastic and funny, independent, and he was a person who knew how to live his life, even when faced with a diagnosis of an aggressive cancer. And I know from conversations that I had with Rob that he knew where this was headed. He didn't dwell on the fact that cancer could end his life because he didn't have time for that. Rob could be tough on his parents. Sometimes him and his mom would really butt heads. And he gave his mom a hard time. We would sometimes comment, it seems like he's so mean to her. But it was clear that there were two reasons why he was tough with her. One was that he just didn't want to be treated any differently, like he was sick at all. He also wanted to protect her. He didn't want her to worry about him. And he wanted to live his life as much as he could without cancer controlling him. So he tried to control anything else that he could. But the love that he had for his family and appreciation of their support was tremendous, because he knew that when he needed them, they would be there. And no teenager or young adult boy wants their mom or dad to do anything or everything for them. But when his cancer did progress to the point where he couldn't be independent, the strength and their dedication of his family was critical. His parents and brothers gave him the support he needed at that time, and I know how much he appreciated that and how important that was to have. Robbie fought to the end. His last admissions to the hospital were tough because he wasn't able to be an independent person as he wanted. He was able to accept this, and this was because of the love for his family. What I'll most remember, though, about Robbie is not these last few weeks or how he died, but how he lived in the years prior when he felt healthy even though he had a life-threatening illness. I'll always smile when I think of Robbie walking into the clinic like he owned the place, declaring, "Let's get going here, because I have places to be." Thank you.
Hello, my name's Doug. Does this go up? I'm already stooping at 57, I don't need to. All right. Hi. Thanks, everyone, for being here today to celebrate Rob's life and sharing his memories. Before I get started, there's just a couple of housekeeping notes. First, there's a pile of T-shirts in the front room if anybody wants one, but I think they're already gone, so you're out of luck. There's some wristbands as well. Please help yourself. Nothing would please us more to see someone wearing a Madaket T-shirt in Avon or anywhere in the world. The second thing is, when this video is over, we're done. And I'd like to give a special shout out to John Carmen and his staff. They've been wonderful in helping put together all the arrangements and getting us through this past week. I know he had to leave to help somebody else. They know what they're doing, and they're true professionals. So thank you, John. All right, here we go. As most of you know, I'm not a man of many spoken words, mostly because other people won't stop talking. So today it's payback, as you're a captive audience, and I'll bet none of you wants to be embarrassed by getting up in the middle of my tribute. But don't worry, there won't be a test. Many of you, if not all of you, have helped us throughout the 4-year ordeal. For that, we thank you with all our hearts and soul. Without your safety net, we would have remained in free fall. We will forever be grateful. I would like to thank my beautiful wife, Liz, for being the rock around which we all swam, as difficult as this is for the rest of us, she, of course, as his mother, had it the worst. She knew Robbie longer than any of us, and she carried him for 9 months. We all know the special bond between a mother and a child. I'd also like to say how proud I am of my 2 sons, Will and Thomas, for being great kids and for stepping up and being there for Robbie. I love you 3 more than anything in the world. Thank you to all the families and friends and even strangers for helping us through this ordeal in little and big ways, which are too numerous to mention here today. And of course, everyone at Connecticut Children's Medical Center deserves a special thank you. It became our home away from home, our vacation home. Thank you for adopting Robbie as a member of your family. Although Liz and I would have preferred Rob remain at home, he felt safer and more secure there, thanks to the loving care he received. And turns out he was right. CCMC was the best place for him to be. Thank you for making Rob feel special and for taking care of my son. It is said that no parent should have to experience the death of a child. To that I say, duh. But should is not reality. Reality is us sitting here today. Ironically, death is part of life. Now that's not meant to be profound. We all know that death is inevitable. We all want things to go in a natural order, though, so that death arrives when it's supposed to. Grow up, go to college, get a job, buy a house, have children, go to work, and work, and work some more, retire, have grandchildren, move out of Connecticut, watch yourself fall apart as things stop working, then die, preferably at age 100, give or take a few years. That's the plan we more or less all want. But as hard as we try, or would like to believe, we don't have complete control. Some die too soon. Some die too late. Some should die a lot earlier. Some should live longer. Were we unlucky? Yes and no. Think of the parents whose child died in service while protecting our country. They never had a chance to say goodbye. We were lucky enough to be able to say goodbye. Think of Sandy Hook. We were lucky that this did not happen to us. We were able to say goodbye. Think of 9/11. Think of the Holocaust. We were lucky to have Robbie for almost 20 years. He brought great joy into our lives and always will. He loved to laugh. He could make himself laugh, mostly for no apparent reason to the rest of us. In fact, I nicknamed him the boy who could make himself laugh. He would break out into spontaneous laughter at the dinner table, especially when he was trying to attract attention and impress the girls his older brothers brought to dinner. That was an early sign of what was to become his wisecracking, literal, and bone-dry sense of humor, and I don't know where he got that from. Unbelievably, a sense of humor he kept to the last day. Once, recently, when he and I briefly talked about what was happening to him, and I told him it was just plain old, sheer bad luck, to be polite, he said, "It's okay, you can't win them all." After a particularly long day of well-meaning visitors, he said to me, "That should have been an extended wake, no more than 5 minutes per visit, and they have to kneel down in front of me." Rob had a few other nicknames. The Pasta King. He loved pasta by the pound, with butter and salt, and that's it. Dinner for us frequently consisted of 2 pounds of pasta, one for Rob, one for the rest of us. The boy of 1,000 faces. He would ham it up and pose for the camera, often at my urging, until he got to be a teenager, and his tongue played a prominent role. And Pup. Pup was his first nickname because he was the puppy of the family and because he was so cute. Blonde hair, electric blue eyes. Since he was a baby in daycare, people would comment about his blue eyes. Rob loved to play sports, as did his brothers, as most boys do. He didn't have extreme natural talent, but he was talented enough. And perhaps his best talent was his determination. Thanks to a great pitching coach, he was quite the pitcher in Little League, IMHO. In my humble opinion, for those over 40. He had great pitching form as I taught him to pitch like they did back in the 1960s when pitchers dominated baseball. Follow through, use your weight, touch the ground after the pitch. And amazingly, he even listened to me. And thankfully, I have it on videotape somewhere in a pile of tapes. One of my favorite photos of him was one with his gritty stare while set to throw a pitch to me behind his Little League dugout. You'll see it in the video that's next. We even built a pitching mound in the backyard next to our soccer field, which he loved to use. Rob didn't particularly love homework, just like his brothers. I think they liked home, but not work, generally. But he did like going to school. It was the place to socialize. I think Rob was as popular as he was because he was such a nice kid. Not because he was the star quarterback, but because he was a nice kid. Let me share with you a few things about Rob. Back in January, he went on the classic college road trip to Florida with Roy and Leanna. You know, the one where you drive 24 hours straight and it looks good on paper till you actually start it, and then by the time you hit Virginia, it's been 12 hours, and you're like, oh crap, I gotta go another 12 hours, that kind of trip. Been there. They drove all the way to Tampa, and Rob had to fly back after a week or so for medical treatment, but his friends drove back, and while in Florida, they bought a dog, which they named Henry Manicat Walton. Manicat for Rob's middle name, and Walton for his best friend, Roy. Let's see, go to Florida for vacation and buy a dog. Who doesn't do that? He told us later that he bought Henry so we would have something to remember him by after he was gone. That's not the only thoughtful thing Rob did in the last few months. I had lined up a meet and greet and tickets to see pop music star Ed Sheeran. Who? Rob hadn't been feeling well for a while, but he was determined to go, so we invited 3 of his friends to go along with him. Up until the day of the concert, and hour by hour during that day, he said he would be going. But when it was time to leave, he wanted to rest some more, so he told his friends to go to the meet and greet. And then his mother would drive him separately in time for the concert. I met his friends there, because I had to get the tickets, and the 4 of us met Ed Sheeran. Rob then texted his friends and said he was too tired to go to the show. So his friends, with me tagging along, went to the concert. I think I lasted 4 songs, or was it 1 song? They all sounded the same. And I could barely hear it for all the teenage girls screaming. I think Rob knew all along that he wasn't going to make it, but he wanted to make sure his friends went. He had set us up. A similar thing happened this summer. We had booked a 2-week vacation on Nantucket, our family's favorite vacation spot. But the morning we were supposed to leave, Rob was at home in so much pain we had to call an ambulance to take him back to the hospital. I think he'd only been home for 2 days. It was a beautiful Saturday, July 4th. Rob had every intention of going, so he insisted that we go and that he'd be up in a couple of days. So Will and I drove up and took the ferry to Nantucket on the Tuesday. Rob told his mother to go up too, so she and Thomas came up on the Wednesday. The plan was for him and Roy to come up on Friday, which turned into Saturday, which turned into the following week. Keep in mind that he wasn't going to be able to just jump out of the car and walk onto the ferry. No, he would have to endure a 4-hour car ride hooked up to an IV, then get in a wheelchair for the boat ride. We had all his medical supplies on island waiting for him, IV fluid, medications, oxygen tanks. Turns out he never made it. He wanted to go. He was determined to go. But deep down, I think he knew he was too tired to do it. So we made sure his family went. We were outsmarted again. If he told us he couldn't make it, we probably would not have gone because we would have felt guilty for leaving him behind. He knew that. He set us up again, so we did it his way. In fact, that was what Rob did. He did it his way, to the very end. One of his oncologists, Dr. Moss, told me this many times to help me understand what was going on at the end. He's doing it his way. When Rob decided to stop taking chemo a month or two ago, it didn't mean that he was giving up. What he was doing was taking control over one of the remaining few things he could. Rob fought and lasted far longer than the medical prognosis indicated. He did it his way. The last thing that Rob said to me was, "I'm tired." He said it twice. After the first time, I suggested he try to get some sleep. All he said in response was, "I'm tired." He was gone 5 hours later. A couple days before that, he awakened from his in and out sleep and out of the blue said to me, "Dad." I was probably falling asleep to those do-it-yourself shows. "What's up?" I said, "I don't know. What's up with you, Rob?" "Nothing." He'd done that quite a few times to me over the last few months. He still had a sense of humor. My mother wrote me a note a few days ago when she listed the things about Rob that came to her when thinking about him. I'd like to share those with you now. Unforgettable, happy, fun-loving, smiling, polite, considerate, energetic, quick-witted, clever, extraordinary, amazing, charming. Thanks, Mom. About a third of the way done. After his leg salvage surgery in 2012, where they removed the middle part of his left leg, including the knee joint, and replaced it with titanium parts, Rob joined the Avon High swim team. Mind you, he was never a swimmer before, although he knew how to swim. I'm sure a good part of it was for the social aspect. And what high school boy wouldn't want to see girls in swimsuits? Actually, kind of smart if you think about it. Let's see. Join wrestling and wrestle with a bunch of sweaty, stinky boys, or hang out by a pool with half-naked girls. All kidding aside, I was amazed by his determination, knowing he would likely come in last in every heat. Most kids would probably quit to avoid that embarrassment. But his victories were measured by the clock, by the seconds he was able to shave off his own time. He competed against himself and against cancer. And his teammates knew it, and they cheered loudest for him. Okay, so I said it. Cancer. It's an ugly word. Hard to think about, harder to say. You all know the who, what, where, and when of Rob's cancer journey, but what's missing is the why. The why we all want the answer to, of course, cannot be answered. Why him? Why Robbie? Sure, medically we know what happened. A freak transmutation of 2 chromosomes in a single cell of his DNA located in his distal left femur. I still don't know what distal means, Dr. Isakoff. That's the easy why to understand. But why did Rob get cancer? Well, as far as I'm concerned, there is no reason. He didn't get it because he was evil with God unleashing his wrath on him. He didn't get it so a greater good could happen. What greater good for him would be better than living a long and happy life with family and friends? But Rob was able to do and have a lot of things that he probably would never have done if he didn't have cancer. A week-long Make-A-Wish cruise in Europe, a week-long cruise in the Caribbean, a hole of golf with Gino Arema, a video shout-out from Ed Sheeran, who wore Rob's wristband on stage during the whole show, a video shout-out from a couple of Entourage stars, a FaceTime call with Tony Romo, which he refused to take, he blew off Tony Romo. Multiple phone calls from Kobe Bryant, which he refused to answer. He blew off Kobe Bryant. Signed photos and swag from sports stars and celebrities, golf clubs, an electric bike, a weight set, an iPad, a gaming laptop, a gaming chair, and tons of gift cards and more. As fun and great as all that stuff was, you can't really 100% enjoy it, because what never goes away is the thought in the back of your head that this is all happening because you have cancer. Cancer that you might die from. This is always there. Always. Oh, it might slip away during moments of laughter, but it always and quickly returns. You have cancer. And it puts a damper on all the fun. I know Rob would give it all back to be alive. I would too. If any good came out of this, I would gladly give it all back to get Robbie back. Some may think or say that this is maybe a better person. Well, to be honest, if I am a better person in any way, I'd rather go back to being a jerk. If that would bring Robbie back. In fact, I'd give it all back even if Robbie became a jerk. I'm sure most of you have heard of Einstein's theory of relativity. I bet you didn't think you were going to hear about that today. Part of it deals with the possibility of traveling forward or backward in time. Last page. Stephen Hawking has suggested that time protects itself by preventing time travel to the past. Others suggest, don't think that I understand this. Others suggest that the time traveler would simply enter a parallel universe that evolves along its own separate route in space. Cool. And others say that past, present, and future might all exist at the same time, so to speak. Perhaps all of space and time exist at once, and our travels through time are simply something that our conscious minds undertake. For me, Robbie is still alive. He existed, therefore he still exists, but only at a point in time in the past, in parallel with today. So anytime I want to see and talk to Rob, I go to that place in time, and he's there. Someday, if we can sometime travel back in time, we would find Rob there, which means he's still alive. I know a lot of you took great comfort from the service yesterday, and I appreciate that. For me, the next time I truly see Rob is either from a time machine or in heaven. I'm fine with either one. Thank you.